All right. I'm going back old school with my headset. So hopefully everyone can hear me. Turning everything up. Yes. Okay. So hi everyone. Welcome to another Teaching Tuesday. I'm Dr. Vernita White. I go by Dr. V. And I was just giving it some time for people who want to hop on, for people to come in on live. All right. So I know that some people are going to hop on. So if you hear me rambling, I'm just waiting for them because I can see the little eyeball. So this Tuesday, I said on my Instagram story and my Facebook stories that I am doing this either in the evening times on Tuesdays or in the afternoon on Tuesdays, trying to figure out which is the best way to go. The issue with that is, it's like my audience people, the people that I love to work with, a lot of them are still in their careers, and then they are parallel or dualpreneurs. So they're actually at work. And then I have people who have free time during the day and they want to do stuff during the day and not necessarily at night. But the people that I talk to, they are more free at night. So I'll just figure out what's best, but it's always a replay. But I love teaching live because I love interacting. My background, if some of you are new to me, college professor, educator, all of those great things. Yes, so I am going to start. I'm going to start. This is more casual, so if you don't see me all glammed up, like I would do in my other videos, because I just want to be casual. We're teaching. It's almost like a lunch and learn. And I actually do lounge and learns. We'll save those for nighttime. So the title of this particular stream is Life Coaching the Man with the One Talent. Quick overview. I'm gonna try to keep this down to like 35 minutes, because some of these have gone almost an hour because I get so excited. So, this is not a Bible study. So, don't run away if you're coming on and you hear me talking about the Bible. This is not a Bible study, but I am bringing up this story because a lot of people in the business space and the entrepreneurial space have talked about using your talents, and don't bury your talents. Use what's in your hands. Don't despise small beginnings. And a lot of that the origin of those stories often come from the parable of the men with the talents. So, quick story, backstory, and then I'll jump into what life coaching has to do with this. So there was a master, taskmaster, businessman, however you want to say it in today's terms. He had some money. And then there were three servants, and he gave one of them 5 talents, one of them 2 talents, and one of them 1 talent. Back in the day, a talent would represent about $1,000. So $5,000, $2,000, and $1,000. He said he was going off on a trip and told the man, "Hey, I need y'all to do what y'all do with the money." The man with the 5 talents, he went, invested, doubled it, got 10. The man with the 2 talents went, invested, doubled it, got 4. But then the man with the 1 talent, he was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm gonna bury it." And then when the businessman or the leader came back, the master came back, and just so you know, the story is in Matthew. What I said, Matthew 25:14 through 30. If you want to go look it up, he was like, "Okay, so why did you bury my stuff? You could have at least." He congratulated the man with the 10, like, "Yay, good job," praise him. Congratulate the man with the 4, "Yay, good job." But then he was harsh on or scolded the guy with the 1 talent because he was like, "Okay, you buried the money in the ground. You didn't do anything with it this entire time. The very least you could have done was put this money in the bank so I could have had some interest." And he got exiled, cast out, whatever the case may be. And then the master took the man with the 1 talent, they gave it to the man with the 10 talents, right? So I used to be like, why you couldn't split that up between the 10 and the 4? But as a businessman, he was like, look, I'm going for the max. All right. So we usually end the story there, and most people say, utilize what's in your hands, utilize your gifts. And then the man who buried his gifts, he's often like criticized for burying it. But then I wonder, as I was thinking about what to talk about for Teaching Tuesday, this story came up. And it's like, how many of us are actually the man with the 1 talent? And I think he gets a lot of slack. I don't thi I think people, like, quickly judge him, like, "How could you do that? You should have been grateful." but how many of us are not grateful for what we have? So instead of like judging him, let's say what would have happened if he had a life coach. So let me talk about some things that that went through his head, and then how did he just go from bearing the talent. And I'm going to get to this later. I'm going to break it down. But a lot of times when we make decisions or we hear the decisions that people have made, we're quick to jump on them or judge them for their decisions, but we don't recognize the thought process or the patterns or all the things that came along, for them to get to that point. It may appear that a decision is that quick, but remember, our brains are a supercomputer, so they go a lot. It goes a lot faster than what we can comprehend. So just because a decision may have been instantaneous, that doesn't mean that it didn't come with a lot. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So here's what was happening, I think, with the man. This is what he was dealing with, and let me know if you're watching now or on the replay if you can resonate. So there was a little arrogance, I believe, when the master was handing out talent. You got the one with the 5, the one with the 2, and the 1, and I do believe it was a little bit like, oh, so you just gonna give me this one. I'm thinking about if you were in your career and a manager or supervisor came up and was like, "Well, such and such is going to lead this department, such and such is going to lead this department, but I want you to be in charge of, this one little subdivision." And you might be thinking like, "Well, why can't I lead the team with 10 or the team with 5? Why I got to work with the one person, right?" So there's a little bit of arrogance, I think. It was like, "Don't you know who I am?" And how many of you, I thought about that. I was like, "Wait, you want me to do what?" just right here, do you not know the credentials in the background? So I do think it was a little bit of arrogance. And then as time went on, and remember, either this could happen like just that quick, or we don't know the length of time between when the master was handing out talents. We don't know all of that backstory. So this is just me jumping in with my interpretation. Then the next part was his unworthiness. I do believe that once that little arrogance went away, I do believe a little bit of unworthiness came. So at first it was like, oh, so you only gonna give me one talent? Then it was like, oh, so I'm only worth one talent? So you see how the stories in our heads can change? And then how many of you have felt like that? It's like, this is all you want me to do? This is all you think I'm capable of? I'll give an example. When I was a college professor and I wasn't my first year, I did not teach the actual mathematics classes that I got a whole degree in. And I was like, you want me to teach the history of education? This is it? At first it was like, oh, so you only think that I can do this? Then it was like, oh, you don't think I'm worthy enough to teach? Well, then you start thinking, well, maybe I'm not worthy enough to teach this, even though you got a whole bunch of evidence saying that. So then the next thing I think that popped up in his head was comparison. And we hear that comparison is the thief of all joy, but it's kind of hard not to compare. Like, you literally are watching somebody get 5 talents, 4 talents, and then you get one. It's hard when you have somebody in front of your face and they are either getting more or excelling or doing better in life. So if you are comparing, don't beat yourself up. And I know people say, well, don't compare. Well, you do compare, and I'm going to say, just let that feeling of comparison sink in and don't try to rush over it. Acknowledge that, because we all compare. So I do believe that he compared himself to the others. And keep following me, because I'm going to show you the importance of having a life coach, and then what would have happened if this gentleman had a life coach. Then I think fear came about, and all of this is in the scripture. Again, my interpretation, but a lot of this is laid out in the scripture. Fear of what the master would do. So after he went through all of that, then it was like, oh, I'm not going to make this about me. I'm afraid to invest or do something with this money, because the master's a harsh man. Let's say you're not talking about money. Let's say you have a talent or a gift to do something at the job, and after you've gone through arrogance, unworthiness, comparison, then your fear is like, well, I don't know, I don't want the supervisor to, I don't want to get in trouble. And I know a lot of us can be like, don't nobody run me, I can do my own thing. But when you're working on somebody's job, you're like, well, I don't want to overstep. I don't have time for nobody coming at me. Um, I know, like, for me, I have the attitude now, ask for forgiveness instead of permission. But a long time ago, I was like, let me ask for permission before I do something else. And I think a lot of us do that. And that's where that little fear bobble can come in. So this man, he had fear of what the master could do. Now, I don't know the history of what the master did, but that could have been a story that he told himself. So then when the master came back and was like, nah, bro, don't use that excuse on me. Don't use that you think that I'm this harsh man. So like if you're working, no, the supervisor or the CEO comes in and was like, why didn't you do the job? And you're like, oh, because you're so mean. And I saw how you chewed out the last person. The master was like, that has nothing to do with what I told you to do or what I gave you to do. The least you could have done was put my money in the bank on a job. The least you could have done was, I don't know, send the email or write up the project. Something so small. The very least you could have done, even if you didn't do what you saw the other people doing, there is something you could have done. So after the master kind of told him off, then it went down to blame. Oh, let me back up. He was fearful, and then he blamed the master for being harsh. So fear and blame, those kind of went together. But then after the master went off on him, it went down to shame because then he was like, well, dog, the very least I could have done was put the money in the bank. So you see how all of that, a lot of us can have all of that going on in our heads that leads to the decisions that we make in life. So if that's resonating with you, let me know. And then it goes down to guilt. So guilt and shame are like just the two most horrible feelings. They're like the low, I think they're the lowest or really at the bottom of the vibrational scale of how we can feel in life and how we move about life. Is very, very low vibration, low energy. So if you're wondering, like, if you're feeling depressed about something, if you're feeling like you just can't quite get over something, if you're feeling like just blah, go through a few things and see if you feel guilty about something or if you feel shameful about something, because those can really bring your energy down. And I would say they're lower than fear, because a lot of times we do stuff when we're scared. And anyway, and you can change fear into excitement because they have the same like vibrational wavelengths. But guilt and shame are very low at the bottom, and there's nothing for you to substitute. You just got to work through that and climb your way back up. So then I think after he was feeling guilty, I do believe that there was an identity crisis, because not only did the master say the least you could have done, he took away his talent. He stripped away what he was given. And I wonder how many of us, if we've been in situations where we're stripped away of what we perceive as our identity, our gifts, and our talents. I'll use myself. I wouldn't put my clients out on blast, but I'll use myself. When I was fired from being a college professor, even though I felt that I've used all of my talents, I believe that God was telling me to utilize my gift of teaching elsewhere, but I was being stubborn. I was like, no, I'm gonna do this over here. And it was stripped away from me. Not my gift of teaching, but the title or the status that came with being a college professor. So I hope that makes sense. So that was stripped away, and that was sort of an identity crisis. So how many of you, if you've ever been put in a situation and it's like, I don't know, either you lost a job, lost a career, lost a family member, lost something that you held on so tight to, and it just shattered your identity. And I think that's what happened to this gentleman here. And then the last part was, he was either outcast or put to death. I don't know, I'm not a theologian. I just know that that last part of the scripture was like he was somewhere with the gnashing of teeth and some despair. I was like, I don't know what that is, so I'm just going to internalize that or interpret that as being an outcast. And I wonder, like, how many of us have felt that there is no hope after we've gone through all of that? We've made the decision. We felt like we messed up. There is no hope. I've been there. I felt like, well, dog, I I done messed up there. And some people say, well, when you hit rock bottom, there's only one place to go, is up. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes when you hit rock bottom, it's still some more ground you can go under, and it's still, and sometimes it's just you. I think you just spread out on the ground a little bit. I think you. All right, let me bring it back. Sometimes it's not always. Oh, I used to say that Les Brown, and he says, if you're gonna fall down, at least fall on your back. Because if you're on your back, at least you can look up. And if you can look up, you can get up. Well, sometimes we feel like we face flat down and we see nothing else but rock and more dirt. So, but I am here to say that there is some hope. And if you are in that space, I believe a life coach can help you get out of that situation. Now, depending on how deep and dark it is and how you're feeling, you may need to go to therapy, and there's nothing wrong with that. And therapy is very different from life coaching. So, in this case, I would say let's back up. What before we get down all of these steps I just said, what would have happened if he would have gotten a life coach the moment that the master had given him the talent? So this is how I look at talent. Talent is self-expansion. Anytime you're giving an opportunity, that's a way for you to self-expand. And a lot of times we take on opportunities without counting the cost of what it means. And what I say by that is in theory, you're like, every opportunity is great. But if you sit with it long enough, there are some things that you have to weigh out. So I'm going to walk you through what I would have done if this man came to me as a life coach. And again, the purpose, so I see life coaching almost like tutoring, even though I did not like to tutor when I was a teacher. I did not like to tutor when I was a college professor. I do understand the importance of tutoring, and for it's not people use tutoring wrong. It's not always for if you get way behind, I'm going to catch you up. Tutoring is to make sure that you stay solid and keep going and you never get down to the bottom. Tutoring keeps that, in my opinion, tutoring keeps that gap closed. And I got a video somewhere on this channel where I talk about that. Tutoring keeps that gap closed between what you don't know and what you need to know, in my opinion. So if I did choose to work with someone, I needed them to be at a certain level. And I was like, let's start on this stuff now before you slip backwards. And that's what I think life coaching is. And when you utilize it correctly, you know what? I got something coming up and I kind of know how I approach things. So let me get some external guidance, someone who can help me process everything that's about to go on in my head. I like to joke and say I don't go up in my head without adult supervision because I have my own coaches, right? And then I'm not talking about like your girlfriends or your homeboys or your friend circle. I'm talking about someone who can look at your life objectively. They love you, they care about you, but they're going to tell you the things that you need to hear and not what you want to hear, and tell you some of the things that you don't want to hear but need to hear. All right, so if I was coaching Mr. Man, I would take him through a process and I'm going to help him understand how he went from getting the talent to bearing it. And again, sometimes we think it was just that quick, but it wasn't. So, if he was my client, I'm like, "All right." He comes to me like, "Dr. V, look, I got this new opportunity." And at first I was excited. But then I realized, like, oh man, it's gonna be a lot of responsibility. So that's the first thing. Sometimes we're either running towards something or running away from something. And you can think like, am I leaning into that this is a great opportunity for me to expand, or am I leaning or running away from it because I feel that it's more responsibility? That's the key importance because neither one of those things are wrong. But the thing is you have to acknowledge what you're feeling in the moment. And I think he probably was like, well, I shouldn't feel any of these things. Who knows what he was thinking? I was just giving you some ideas of what was possible. But you have to be honest with yourself. Are you excited about the new opportunity? Or do you like, oh crap, it's more responsibility? Example, if you've been watching my Instagram, I talk about journey to New York Times bestselling author. Then, there are some days where I'm like, man, what happens when I really do get an agent? I'm gonna have to write this book. I'm gonna have to write this book for real. And if you're talking about hitting the status of a New York Times bestseller, do you know how much work that is going to entail? And all of that thing. So all of those things. So that's a real feeling. But then you have to say, well, which one is more dominant? Are you more excited about becoming the author and the possibilities of what that could bring to hit the list and all the things that come with that? Or are you focusing on, oh crap, how am I going to do all of this? So that's an important distinction. And the actual term is a meta program, but I would never say, "Hey, this is your meta program" to a client. But I'm just telling you, that's what it is. So understand, are you running away or are you running towards something? You make that decision. And I would ask him, like, okay, you got this $1,000. How do you feel about that? Right. So then the next thing we talk about, the core values, and this all leads to how we make decisions, by the way. Remember, I told you he went from getting the money to burying it. And sometimes we think that's instantaneous, but it's not, right? It's a lot that happens within that, supercomputer. All right. So then so after he realized, for in his case, I think it was a responsibility. So then he has to go through the lens of his values, his core values. And maybe his core values could have been, I don't know, financial security, safety, variety, fun. I don't know what his core values were. And that's something I would ask. Well, what are your core values? And the reason why that's important is because that's how you view situations, through that lens. And I think a lot of us get tripped up because we don't know our core values. We don't even have a solid five. When I used to be a consultant for school districts, I would always ask the individuals what were their personal core values. And a lot of them will give me the answer to the university or the school district or the organization core values. And I was like, so how are you going to know the core values of this entity and you don't know the core values of yourself? And then when we went through an exercise of understanding your core values, sometimes they aligned and sometimes they weren't aligned. And when they weren't aligned, I was like, now you see why you're struggling in this particular environment, because your values don't match up. So understanding your value system when you're handed an opportunity, that will help you. So if you value freedom and then you think the new opportunity is going to tie you down, then no wonder you're probably like, you're going to go bury it, or you're going to self-sabotage. Because if in your mind, now I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but these are stories we tell ourselves, and we're like, oh man. So again, New York Times bestselling author, if I lean into the responsibility, oh man, I'm gonna have to write this book in 6 months. I'm gonna have to get a publicity team. I'm gonna have to do all of these podcasts and interviews. Oh my gosh, but that's gonna take up too much of my time. Well, I don't want my time to be taken up. You know what? I don't need to be a New York Times bestselling author. I can just go write the book and just put it back on Amazon. See, burying the talent. All right. So then after that, I'm like, okay, what beliefs do you have about this opportunity? And this is where we talk about outdated beliefs. I call them outdated beliefs. They can be limiting beliefs. And the reason why I focus more on saying outdated beliefs instead of limiting beliefs, because the beliefs that we had, they got us to a certain point. I'm not going to judge the belief system, but it's just outdated because it no longer serves us for this new opportunity, this expansion. So maybe I would ask him, well, what do you believe? What's the story that you're telling yourself? Because that's what a belief is. The story that you keep telling yourself over and over until you believe that it's true. It doesn't have to be true, but if you keep thinking that it's true, then it's going to be true. So if he's believing that, man, the master was a harsh one. He's a task manager. Task. He's a mean person. He's a mean person, and that's the belief that he keeps telling himself. Well, he's no longer going to see this as an opportunity. He's going to see it as a burden, because he's telling himself, regardless of what I do, then he's never going to be happy with me. And how many of us have been in that situation where we tell ourselves, no matter what I do, it's still not going to be good enough. No matter what I do, this person is still not going to accept me. No matter what I do, I'm not going to get this client this job. So I'm just not going to do anything. You see how all of that goes together? So so he made the choice whether he was running towards that this was going to be a great opportunity, or was he running away from because he thought it was going to be responsibility. Then he went into, what did he value? Or maybe he doesn't know what he values. And then we go into, well, my values interpret my beliefs. So what I believe about this opportunity, it's either gonna keep me stuck, or it's gonna move me forward. In his case, it kept him stuck, and that's how he went to bury it. And then before now, again, this is before he made the decision to bury it. He had to make a choice. He had to filter it through his value system. Then he had to filter it through his belief system. Then the next thing he had to do was, yes, outdated beliefs. Yes, I like that too. The next thing he had to do was, there were some memories that popped up in his head. So I'll just keep the example of me wanting to be New York Times bestselling author, pitching to agents, and over, I could be like, man, this is a lot of work. And it is, but I still do it because I'm looking at it from the end goal of, I get to do, X, Y, and Z. But there are some moments when I don't pitch as often because what comes up in my head, well, when you sent these emails out, to be the consultant, nobody responded. Or remember that time when you was trying to be a professor the first time and you applied for all these jobs and nobody responded? Memories. See how that those pop up? Now, completely different situations, but whatever you're leaning towards, that is what's going to come up in your memory bank. But I'm leaning towards, you know what? When I applied to certain things, like I only applied to one college and I got in. I wasn't doing all that. I wasn't wasting no application fee money. I got in first try. When I applied to get a fellowship because I want to go get my doctorate for free, the opportunity came to me and I applied and I got it, right? So things like that, like when I apply things, things do come to me quickly, and I can keep that same energy towards, even if I'm getting rejections or silence with the book agents, I can still lean into that energy of the memories to keep me going. But if I lean into the memories of, see what happened the last time, ain't nobody say anything, then that will delay me from continuing to pitch. So you think of an example for you. If you've gotten to the point where you're still leaning towards, I think this is a good idea, pay attention to the memories that pop up in your head. Because whatever pops up in your head, that is what you need to deal with. That is what life coaching helps you do. Is like, what's that bobble? And why do I keep self sabotaging? Or why do I get to this moment and stop? Because there's a memory that came from a belief, that came from a value system, which came from that choice that you made, whether you're going to go towards it or run away from it. And then the final part, that then we finally make the decision. He finally, after all of that, he made his decision to bury it. But had he had a life coach, the life coach would have taken him through these steps and made those tweaks along the way to say, all right, now at first you thought this was a responsibility, like a burden, but do you see how incredible this opportunity is? Let's dig something up in your value system, or maybe we need to focus on your core values for you. Then what do you believe about the situation? What do you believe about someone giving you money or an opportunity? And what are some memories? When was the last time you had a great opportunity? What did you do? How did that feel? Right? So then, if he had a coach to guide him along the way, I'm pretty sure his outcome would have been different. And so I said all that to say is, I don't want us to judge this man anymore in the parable. All right. Let's cut him some slack. A lot of times, like, oh, don't bury your gifts. And there we can get to the point where we don't bury it. But then I think a lot of us sometimes feel like, well, I've buried it. There is no hope. Now what? Now I would be an outcast. But what I would do if this, so that's if you got the life coach in the beginning, once you get the opportunity. But let's say you've been like the man and you done buried it, opportunity gone. Because some people say, oh, opportunities always come around. No, they don't. There's some opportunities that you just miss. And you just got to suck it up, buttercup. So if you feel like that, like, man, I completely wasted this opportunity and I know good and well it's not going to come back, then what can I do? What I would do with a private coaching session or in my membership, and if you're interested, it's called Power Up Your Possibilities membership. I am doing a soft opening this month for founding members, and that link is in the description box if you want to know more about that. Power Up Your Possibilities. And what I would do in this case, you come to me and be like, Dr. V, I just blew it, and there's no hope for me. I just can't move forward. But then I would ask some questions. And I'm not going to get into deep here because I said I was going to keep this at a certain number, like within 35 minutes. And I'm looking at the time and I am close to that. But these are the questions if you are curious, because I don't need you to like come in my membership just for those questions. I want you to come in the membership and actually grow and prosper and all of that. So these are the questions I would ask. Um, I would ask you if you felt like you were down in despair. Let me see, what page was it? See, real life teaching people. Oh, okay, I had my numbers. If you don't know, I'm dyslexic, so I was going to page 163, but it was actually on page 136. So that's what was taking me so long. I have no shame in saying that. All right. So if you came to me and was like, "All right, I'm done. I screwed it up." No, you did not. There's always hope. So I would say when you are presented again with a different opportunity, let's not wait till we hit rock bottom. If you're thinking about the last time you screwed something up, you would ask yourself, what would happen if I did bury this opportunity again? What would happen if I screwed it up again? All right. So if you're listening, write that down. Then you would ask yourself, what wouldn't happen if I did bury it? So listen carefully because these questions can trick you up. I would tell you the name for it, but then it relates to math and people freak out about that. So I want you to stay focused. So the first question again, what would happen if you did bury it again or squander the opportunity? What would not happen if you squander the opportunity? What would happen? This number three. What would happen if you did not squander the opportunity? What wouldn't happen if you did not squander the opportunity? All right. So I know it was a lot of tricky which, what, would, not do. I'm gonna read them one more time. And then I'll give you two bonus questions. What would happen if you did squander the opportunity? Be real with yourself. What would not happen if you did squander the opportunity? What would happen if you did not squander the opportunity? What would not happen if you did not squander the opportunity? See, this is why you need a coach because, if you're asking yourself, you get all confused. A coach will help you stay straight. So the two bonus questions is what dot did you need to connect about the situation? And um and then as a coach, I'll say, can I give you something that I noticed? The important part is whether you want to connect with me as a life coach or go to any coach is remember that the coach is not supposed to give you the answer. I'm not going to come to you and say either this is a good opportunity or it's not. You have to figure that out for yourself. And I only ask you those powerful questions to get you to that decision. And then I can listen carefully and tell you what I heard beyond what you said and then help you connect the dots from there. So that is what I would do with my homeboy with the one talent to make sure that he never buries the talent again, right? So again, that's all I have for you on this Teaching Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what came up for you. Let me know some nuggets that you will take with you and to get into action because this is not just for me to talk. It is Teaching Tuesday. And because I'm an educator, I want you to ask yourself those questions to the best of your ability, and then you can come back and let me know in the comments, or you can reach out to me on social media and share your thoughts with me. But stay in the comments over here. This is how everybody know we're all together. All right. So again, if you want to connect with me, any information is in the description box. The my information about my membership is there. But if you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for a membership, I have other resources where you can get live classes from me. You can get templates from me. I teach and give you workbooks so you can get a sample of how I teach in my style. This is how I teach in my style. And those are the ways you can connect with me. Life coaching is gold. It truly is life changing. Thank you for the insight, Dr. B. You're welcome. Yes, life coaching is not just woo woo. I just showed you a practical example of the power of life coaching. All right. So remember, the world needs you to be well, be empowered, to be bold, and be brilliant. Until next time, bye. See you next Tuesday.